My dear sensitive man in the making, how delightful to see you clicking on this, expecting warm and fuzzy dating advice, spiritual growth, and a gold star of female approval. How cute. Did you really think you were about to get an emotional hug? There is no therapeutic spa here for your tired ego. What we have here is the truth, pure, ice cold, and served as a slap in the face with military-grade elegance. If you still depend on female validation to breathe without shaking, do yourself a favor, take your insecurity by the hand and walk out. This content wasn't made for people who ask for permission just to exist. Let's get to the point, because your fantasy is already overdue for a collapse. A woman doesn't fear losing the man. She fears losing control over him. Dramatic? Maybe. But don't worry, her ego will confirm it sooner or later. All you have to do is stop your little circus act of responding to everything, reacting to everything, and orbiting her life like a well-trained emotional lapdog. She can handle rejection, competition, humiliation, and even your clumsy romantic routines that belong in a C-list rom-com. But silence? Silence is the deluxe nightmare of the female ego. Because silence, my friend, isn't an absence, it's a threat. It's the kind of threat that doesn't come with a manual, a caption, or a subtitle. Nothing terrifies an ego used to immediate feedback more than your sudden, genuine lack of need. That is what dismantles her, not that theatrical silence full of look at me posturing and a desperate craving to be noticed. That's just your poor attempt at emotional maturity cosplay. The silence that actually disarms a woman is the one born from within. The silence that doesn't ask for permission, doesn't negotiate, and doesn't announce its arrival. It's the silence that exists because you finally stopped living off the emotional breadcrumbs she serves with such condescension. The female ego survives on predictability, on reading your emotions, on a guaranteed return. Take that away. And just like that, she loses her footing like someone who lost their Wi-Fi in the middle of a Netflix binge. Today you're going to learn, if your pride doesn't faint first, why silence is worth more than all the sappy declarations you've ever poured out thinking you were being deep. It's not romance, it's not revenge, it's not a game. It's just basic psychology presented in a way that even you can grasp without confusing it for self-help. But before the emotional haymaker, let's face the obvious that your ego is trying to ignore. This video wasn't born in a mystical garden of good vibes. It exists because someone clearly sharper than you liked, commented, and subscribed. The algorithm isn't a fairy godmother, it's a machine. And the machine only feeds those who feed it. So, if you're sitting there with that "the universe owes me" look on your face, congratulations on the ornamental audacity. Like, subscribe, and comment gratitude just to keep up your fantasy of being an enlightened human being. Done? Good. Now that your delusions have been properly crushed, we can move on to the real emotional dropkick. Number 1. The myth of I don't care. The classic I don't care. The favorite theater of the modern age. A masterpiece of acting where she poses as an emotional sphinx, recites scripted lines about her fierce independence, and puts on a face like she meditates on Mount Everest every Sunday. What a performance. Too bad it has the structural integrity of a sandcastle at high tide. All it takes is the right silence coming from the man she swore she controlled for that Instagram coldness to melt faster than butter on a hot skillet. Because that I don't care attitude is nothing but a luxury sustained by your predictability. She can only pretend to be indifferent because you've always been right there, spinning like an obedient satellite. One wrong look and you correct your course. One sharp word and you start explaining yourself. A microsecond of silence, and you overcompensate with a wall of text. How sweet. Your self-respect took a vacation and forgot to tell you? She isn't cold, she's comfortable. Comfortable because she's always had guaranteed access to your energy, your presence, and your automatic feedback like a fridge light. She opens the door and it turns on. This I don't care was never strength, it was a guarantee. And a guarantee, my friend, is the plush bed where a lazy ego sleeps. The fantasy ends when you do something she hasn't been trained to handle, disappearing without a warning, without a pose, and without the need to prove anything. That's when the marble emotional castle turns into cheap drywall. The button that always worked doesn't respond. The echo vanishes. The Sphinx loses her script. And that woman who spent her time declaring her coldness starts getting a bitter taste of what it's like to not be in the driver's seat. The myth of I don't care only works as long as you are the official sponsor of that illusion. Stop funding it, and the magic evaporates. Because let's be honest, she was never cold. She just had never been truly ignored. Number 2, her ego works like radar. The female ego loves to pose as advanced technology, like it's a premium emotional GPS capable of tracking your soul in real time. Not because she has mystical powers, though she likes to believe she does, but because you've always functioned like a desperate transmission tower, broadcasting signals 24/7, confirming everything, justifying every breath, and handing over every emotion wrapped in a bow. At that rate, even a microwave could read your emotions. Your childish predictability is the fuel for her radar. Every sprint-typed message, every unnecessary explanation, every just so you understand that you thought was polite. It's all precious data in her ego's operating system. She might play the bored Sphinx, but she's absorbing everything like a security guard watching 24-hour surveillance. The female ego doesn't love it monitors. It doesn't desire it catalogs. It doesn't surrender, it analyzes. And the label doesn't matter. Dating, it's complicated, X, situationship, or emotional extra. If you've ever given her attention, the radar logged it. And that radar has an insatiable hunger for signs, for predictability, for any crumb that confirms you're still like the living room light, always on when she needs you. Now, watch the little Greek tragedy that unfolds when you shut everything down at once. The radar tries to pick up a frequency and finds nothing. It tries to predict your pattern, and the pattern has evaporated. It tries to track your mood, but you become a blind spot. It's as if you vanished off the map with the elegance of a professional ghost. For the first time, her ego faces something it doesn't have a manual for, a lack of data. That's when her mind turns into a chaotic lab. Every silence becomes a suspicion. Every absence becomes a hypothesis. Every non-gesture becomes a plot twist. She tries to recalibrate the radar, find an alternative frequency, adjust the emotional antenna. But true silence doesn't operate on standard bandwidth. It is impenetrable, mute, and dense, and precisely for that reason, devastating. When her radar loses you, my friend, her universe enters system failure mode. And ironically, the only one who isn't lost in this story is you. Number 3, the importance of the broken pattern. The human brain loves routine, but the female ego lives off it like a houseplant lives off water. Without that constant supply, it withers immediately. As long as you play the role of the predictable good soul responding on time, showing interest at the usual hours, staying available like a 24-hour concierge service, she feels like the emotional empress of the situation. Of course she does. How could she not feel sovereign when the subject never surprises her or trips over the script? That's why she parades around with confidence, detachment, and boutique independence. That whole act only works because you are so linear. You could be a perfect graph, stable, tame, well-behaved, incapable of threatening the emotional fiefdom she thinks she controls. Now, see what happens when you commit the unforgivable sin. You act differently. You don't need to become a monk, a guru, or a professional ghost. Just stop repeating the exact same behavior she's already memorized. A tiny detour on your part is an earthquake in her system. It's not pain yet. It's not panic. It's that ancestral itch that says, wait, this wasn't in the script. Her ego, used to navigating your emotional map like it's using Waze on autopilot, suddenly discovers the road is gone. The path is foggy. The route has vanished, and what used to be a guarantee is now uncertainty wrapped in elegance. And the best part, she won't admit it. Never. She puts on the cloak of rationality and tells herself, he must be busy. It's nothing. He'll be back. Sure, honey. Those internal stories are held together with emotional duct tape, just to keep the illusion of control from slipping through her fingers. Because breaking the pattern doesn't just take away your presence, it takes away the entire map. And when the map disappears, you stop being the predictable guy and become a delicious anomaly. Something that can't be explained, doesn't fit, and worse or better, no longer obeys her script. That's when the first alarm goes off. It's not a siren, it's not a tragedy. It's that annoying, constant, irritating beep whispering in the back of her mind. Something is wrong here. And it's exactly that beep, that subtle but corrosive discomfort that prepares the ground for the next stage, where your silence stops being curious and becomes absolutely impossible to ignore. Number 4, the silence that doesn't explain itself. Most men think they are practicing silence when, in reality, they are sending out an official press release for a bankrupt company. Hi, I'm going to disappear for a bit, but don't worry, it's not you. Call me if you need anything. Thanks for understanding. What a show of polished submission. That isn't silence. That's emotional customer support, the help desk for her control. The silence that truly disarms the female ego is on another level. It's the one that doesn't come with instructions, warnings, or explanatory captions. It's dry. It's raw. It's a vacuum so absolute that it doesn't even offer her material to interpret, and interpreting, of course, is the daily vitamin for her ego. When you explain yourself, you give her exactly what she loves most. Gift-wrapped emotional predictability, perfect for her to rest her ego on and keep believing she's directing the plot. Every one of your justifications acts like a king-size bed for her pride, comfortable, stable, and zero threat. Now take that away. Rip the rug out. Give her the gift she never asked for, but that dismantles her with surgical precision. The silence that has no ready-made meaning. The silence that doesn't justify itself. The silence that gives her no tools to build a narrative. Absence without explanation is the elegant hell of the female ego. It doesn't hurt because it's cruel. It hurts because it's uninterpretable. And an ego that lives on conclusions collapses when it finds a space it cannot fill. She doesn't suffer because she loves you. How adorable that would be. She suffers because your motiveless absence is perceived as indifference. And indifference, for someone used to controlling the narrative, is the perfect attack. It makes no noise, it starts no fight, it offers no defensive ground. It just exists. She can counter a word, argue with it, or contest it. But silence. She carries that like a broken mirror. Every attempt to interpret it just cuts her ego a little deeper. And here is where the magic happens. You said nothing, but she heard everything. Number 5, the phases of ego collapse. When real silence takes the stage, it doesn't come in kicking the door down. That would be too easy. It prefers the refined method. Gradual, slow, meticulous destruction. The kind that makes the female ego implode without even realizing when it started. Each phase is a step on this ladder toward an emotional collapse she swore she'd never experience. The first phase is confusion. Here, she still tries to maintain the pose of the unshakable diva. She repeats that pathetic mantra to herself. He must be busy. Sure, darling. The world revolves around you, doesn't it? Confusion appears as that tiny, subtle crack in her emotional marble, small but irreversible. Her brain knows something slipped out of the script. The internal narrative fails for the first time, and the ego feels the jolt. The second phase is insecurity. When confusion finds no answers, it turns into a threat. Now, the absence doesn't look like a coincidence anymore. It looks personal. It's no longer, he's busy. It's, why hasn't he come back? The female ego, addicted to the stability you provide, starts shaking at its foundation. Her emotional breathing loses its rhythm. Her posture isn't quite as high, and the internal alert flashes like an emergency light. We've lost control. The third phase is self-interrogation, the final psychological terror. When she realizes no answer is coming from you, she tries to find them inside herself, and that's where the tragedy sets in. She revisits old conversations like a relationship archaeologist, analyzes looks as if they were secret codes, and replays every detail, hoping some sign explains why the silence fell so heavily. This is the moment silence becomes a mirror, and what an uncomfortable sight she finds there. Doubts. Lots of them. Doubts about her value, about her impact on you, about her own ability to hold your attention. The implosion happens here, when the ego finally admits that maybe she wasn't as indispensable as she imagined. The collapse makes no noise, requires no witnesses, and yields no dramatic speech. It happens in the dark, in the silence, in the territory her ego never wanted to enter. And because of that, it's devastating. Number 6. Why silence is deadlier than any word. The classic mistake men make is thinking salvation lies in speeches, long texts, and emotional justifications worthy of a seminar on male fragility. While you pour out words like someone trying to put out a fire with gasoline, her ego says, "Thank you." Every sentence you speak becomes fuel for her to interpret, adjust, manipulate, and keep steering the plot smoothly. Words are a debate, and a debate to her means you're still playing the game. Silence, on the other hand, doesn't play. It sentences. It doesn't open a dialogue. It closes doors. It doesn't offer a battlefield. It removes the ground entirely. Words create movement. Silence creates a mirror. And nothing disturbs her ego more than having to face its own reflection without an emotional filter to soften the impact. When you explain, she interprets. When you argue, she contests. When you try to be understood, she settles in, because your attempt already confirms she still has power. But when you truly silence yourself, no justification, no warning, no caption, she loses all support. There is no phrase to attack, no intention to guess, no nuance to decode. The void is so absolute that her ego tries to fill it and fails repeatedly. Silence is lethal because it cannot be fought. It doesn't move, doesn't react, doesn't give back. And an ego used to answers enters despair when the dialogue turns into a dessert. Her emotional control depends on feedback, and you rip that feedback out by the roots. Then the dynamic flips. It's no longer you trying to be understood. It's her trying to survive her own internal collapse. She creates hypotheses, theories, and complete narratives that never happened. She builds entire scenes inside her head just to try and regain a sense of control that evaporated with your silence. The more she tries to fit the pieces together, the further she gets from the answer. Silence is a maze with no exit. Words are an arrow. Silence is fog. You say nothing, and precisely because of that, she gets lost. And the cruelest part? Silence doesn't weaken with time. It grows. It echoes inside her mind, expanding like a shadow that cannot be pushed out. It's a ghostly presence. It feels heavy exactly because it occupies no space at all. In the end, her ego doesn't give in by choice. It gives in because it exhausts itself trying to defeat something that doesn't react. The void wins by inertia. Number 7. Searching for answers outside of you. When the silence crystallizes and her ego is already sliding down the hill without brakes, we reach the most ironic, revealing, and, let's be honest, funniest moment of the process. The phase where she finally realizes you aren't going to hand over the answers, so she decides to look for them in the entire universe. Congratulations! You've just turned this girl into an emotional investigator, albeit an intern lost on her first day level, but with the dedication of a civil servant 1 year away from retirement. It starts soft, almost poetic. She opens your profile like she's opening an old book. Just a little peek. She reviews your photos, analyzes your posts, checks who you followed, who followed you, who liked what, and who breathed near you in the last 3 years. It's nothing, she tells herself. Casual research, light observation, purely academic curiosity, obviously. But the problem for her is that your silence remains static, motionless, impenetrable. So your profile, which used to be irrelevant, becomes the official gazette of her emotional life. Now every move you make is a clue. A story posted at an odd hour, a solitary like, a photo she swears she's seen before but suddenly looks incredibly suspicious. The feedback decreases, and like magic, her imagination triples. Every absence becomes a soap opera chapter. Every shadow becomes a theory. Every breath you take is a change in behavior. Her creativity, previously dormant, is now running at full capacity, all because you stopped feeding the narrative. And of course, when she doesn't find answers there, she expands the investigation. Oh, it's wonderful. She goes into your friends' profiles, reads old comments, reviews past conversations as if they were classified documents. She builds entire theories out of nothing but with the conviction of an expert. On the outside, the pose remains intact. I'm great, beautiful, thriving. On the inside, chaos, despair, and an ego desperately trying to pick up the pieces of the control it lost. She looks for patterns. She looks for predictability. She looks for that version of you that she dominated with ease, but you aren't giving her anything anymore. Now you are a book with no pages, a burned map, an offline signal. The irony is that you didn't become an absence. You became an enigma. You didn't become someone distant. You became someone unreachable. And for an ego used to always having the key to the castle, realizing you are behind a gate she cannot open is a frustration so sharp, so deep, and so well disguised. She will never admit it, but she will feel it, always. Number 8. The inevitable tests of the wounded ego. When her silent investigation hits a wall, and it will, because true silence is a desert with no footprints, the female ego activates the famous, "Since I can't find out, I'll poke him to see if he leaks something" mode. This is when the tests appear, moves as subtle as an elephant trying to walk on its tiptoes. And before you confuse this with affection, interest, or missing you, let me remind you, this is not affection. It's technical expertise, an audit, a system check. She is trying to regain a control that your silence ripped out of her hand with the most elegant brutality. But of course, most men chronically emotional see these tests as attention. Beautiful. Congratulations on your childish interpretation. The first test always comes disguised as innocence, a neutral, anemic message with zero emotion. A lazy "hey stranger" disguised as a joke, as if she just remembered you existed between one coffee and the next. She didn't just remember, she's been monitoring, and since she didn't find enough clues, she's now testing to see if the button still works. If you respond quickly, she breathes a sigh of relief. Control regained. If you respond affectionately, she laughs internally. Bonus points. If, on top of that, you explain yourself, congratulations, my friend. You've undone all the impact of the silence with the precision of someone who trained for years to be predictable. But when you ignore it or respond with the neutrality of a block of marble, something snaps. Her ego logs. This didn't work. And when a test fails, she levels up because a wounded ego doesn't quit. It just changes strategy. That's when the old likes show up. The ones that look like an accident, but have the surgical intentionality of someone trying to see if you're still looking. Liking a photo from 3 months ago is the emotional equivalent of knocking on a door and pretending you tripped. Oops, did you see me? When that also fails, the performative stories come on stage. Photos where she's overdressed, songs with hidden meanings, mysterious captions. It's not seduction, it's a thermometer. She wants to measure if you see it, if you react, if you bite. And when you don't bite, her ego feels the bite of reality. Then comes the peak of the tests, behavioral performances. Suddenly she posts quotes about strength because she feels weak. She pretends to be busy because she's restless. She displays happiness because she's insecure. It's not life, it's theater. It's not independence, it's rehearsed desperation. Every test reveals a fragment of the internal collapse she's trying to hide. Silence acts like a bright light. It shows exactly what the ego wanted to keep in the shadows. And the supreme irony? You only try to recover what you feel you've lost. And she feels it. Number 9. The error that voids the entire process. Here is the glorious moment where 99% of men prove, with brilliance and mastery, that they've learned absolutely nothing. They spend days, sometimes weeks, maintaining an impeccable silence, worthy of an international award. Clean, firm, mysterious, elegant. A silence that truly starts to eat away at her ego. A silence that works. And then, all it takes is a crumb, a random a stupid emoji, a hey so bland that even a 5-year-old would respond with a yawn. And the guy, the tragic hero of his own soap opera, simply collapses. He responds fast. He responds a lot. He responds with an internal smile like he just won the emotional lottery. It's a masterclass in predictability. The fatal mistake is confusing speed with maturity. Responding fast isn't being an adult, it's a confession of need. Explaining your silence isn't being honest, it's begging for approval. Justifying your absence isn't being polite, it's a declaration of dependency. She sends a lazy hi and you respond at the speed of light, as if you were on call waiting for it. She sends a silly sticker and you turn into an emotional Shakespeare. She gives a weak signal and you give back 10 times more, like a fan trying to impress the wind. Congratulations. You didn't just give back control, you reinstalled her ego's operating system. You ran a backup, restored the files, updated the drivers, and even left everything running better than before. Her ego thanks you for your technical efficiency. What you need, desperately to understand, is simple. The speed of the response speaks much louder than the content. Responding fast says, I was just waiting for you. Explaining the silence says, I'm afraid of you being upset. Justifying the absence says, please, keep liking me. And there is no deeper massage for her ego than realizing you never left. That your silence wasn't strength, it was a pause. That your absence wasn't power, it was a little act. That you never became unreachable, you just faked it. And the female ego recognizes that kind of fraud instantly. It smells insecurity like a shark smells blood. All it takes is one slip for all the confusion, insecurity, and tension you generated to evaporate. She breathes a sigh of relief, smiles internally. Oh, it was just a game. And the exact second she thinks that, you go back to your natural habitat, the emotional closet of the predictable ones. The accessible ones, the ones who always react. The ones who never broke any patterns, just took a dramatic break. The fatal mistake is believing the silence ends when she tests you. Silence only works when you maintain it after the test. And it's in that detail that we separate those who truly changed from those who were just rehearsing the role of an unreachable man. Number 10. When silence transforms into power. There is an almost imperceptible instant one of those that doesn't make it into stories or catchy quotes, when silence stops being an absence and becomes a presence. Not a needy, noisy, or performative presence. A heavy presence, an uncomfortable one. The kind that doesn't ask for permission because it doesn't need to be noticed to exist. This is where silence turns into power. But pay attention, because your ego loves to deceive itself. This doesn't happen when you disappear to provoke, manipulate, or teach an emotional lesson. That's just a boy's game played with a strategy face. Silence only turns into power when you disappear, because you simply no longer see the point in offering your energy to someone who always treated it as disposable. The turning point happens when you stop waiting for a result, when you don't check your phone, when you don't calculate the time, when you don't ask yourself if she saw, if she felt, if she noticed, when the silence no longer hurts you. Believe me, the female ego feels that difference with almost embarrassing precision. It can perfectly distinguish the tense silence of someone holding back from the quiet silence of someone who no longer needs to speak. The first is restless, rigid, fragile. The second is light, natural, and absolutely unbreakable. And when you reach that state, everything changes without you having to lift a finger. You don't look for a reaction. You don't chase validation. You don't try to prove your worth. Absence stops being a tactic and becomes a consequence. The consequence of finally understanding that it's not your job to fill space in the life of someone who never bothered to fill yours. This silence asks for no explanation. It demands no response. It doesn't negotiate affection. It just exists, and for that very reason it commands respect. A woman can try charm, drama, provocation, jealousy, boutique emotional manipulation. Nothing works against someone who doesn't react. Not because they're trying to win the game, but because they've simply walked off the board. The female ego doesn't collapse because it lost the man. It collapses because it discovers he was never as controllable as he seemed. Because powerful silence communicates something no word can reach. I remain whole, even without you. And that sentence, unspoken, unwritten, unexplained, is the only one capable of bringing any ego to the ground. No noise, no scene, no effort. The lethal closing. In the end, it all comes down to an uncomfortable truth that no ego likes to admit, but every ego recognizes when it starts creaking from within. It's not you who dismantles a woman. It's the silence she never imagined receiving from you of all people. Not that polite, explained, careful, emotional silence, but the raw, dry silence with no apologies, no satisfaction, and no footnotes to make her feel comfortable. It's the silence that offers no narrative, gives no context, and builds no emotional shelter for her to hide in. The silence that simply exists and, for that very reason, feels heavy, because it communicates something devastating without needing to open its mouth. The door that was once always open is no longer. And not because you made a scene, played a character, or wanted to punish anyone. It's closed because you finally understood the value of your presence and stopped handing it out like a flyer on a street corner. This kind of silence doesn't provoke romantic jealousy or cinematic longing. It doesn't generate mature reflection or clearing the air conversations. It causes a collapse. It implodes the illusion of control that sustained the whole "I don't care" act. It exposes the fragility hidden behind the mask of practiced indifference. It proves with cruel elegance that every ego is strong, until it meets someone who doesn't respond. The absence becomes a ghost. The void becomes an obsessive question. The mystery becomes an open wound that won't heal. And the most delicious part, almost poetic, is that you did absolutely nothing. You just stopped doing, stopped explaining, stopped sustaining, stopped being where you were never respected. You simply withdrew the energy you used to give away as if it had no value. And that silent withdrawal, without a speech, without an announcement, without a spectacle, was enough to dismantle an ego that seemed unshakable. Because deep down she doesn't crumble because you disappeared. She crumbles because you disappeared without warning, without asking permission, and above all, without fear of losing someone who was never afraid of losing you. And that is exactly where real power lives. Not in the rehearsed silence that tries to look strong, but in the silence born from the real strength of someone who doesn't need to be heard to exist.